The evening sun dipped low across the wide-open plains, spilling streaks of orange and purple over the horizon as the dust of the day began to settle. And in that quiet hour when the prairie held its breath, a lone cowboy rode his weary horse toward a weather-beaten ranch house that looked as though it had stood against 1,000 storms and carried the weight of too many sorrows. His boots were torn, his hat pulled low, and his face shadowed by miles of road and memories he no longer dared to keep close. But though his body was worn, there was still in his eyes that stubborn glimmer of hope that made men like him keep moving forward, no matter how many times life had knocked them down. And when he reined in before the porch, he dismounted with a grunt, brushing off the trail dust as he glanced up at the door where faint lamplight spilled out, promising warmth he hadn't known in months. So he raised his hand and knocked firmly 3 times, each rap echoing into the silence of the lonely ranch. Inside, the widow Abigail McCrae, a woman whose red dress clung like defiance against the grief that had stolen her husband a year earlier, stood frozen for a breath, her shotgun resting against the wall because out here, a woman alone with a child couldn't afford to take chances, and with her heart caught somewhere between caution and compassion, she opened the door to find the stranger framed by the dying light. His voice rough as gravel when he said, "Ma'am, I don't mean to trouble you, but I'm looking for work. Any work you've got?" And she studied him, his shoulders broad but slumped with weariness, his hands scarred with honest labor, and his eyes, Lord, his eyes carried the kind of loneliness that mirrored her own. But instead of answering, she let the silence hang until the creak of the porch boards reminded her boy. Samuel was just inside, peeking from behind her skirts with wide eyes, and with a faint tremor in her voice, Abigail finally replied, "The only position I've got left here is one I don't think you'd care to take."
Cowboy!
The position of being a father. And those words, sharp and trembling with hidden need, struck the cowboy harder than any bullet ever could, leaving him rooted where he stood. "If you'll let me prove it, I reckon being a father might be the one job worth staying for." And in that instant, as the prairie swallowed the sun and night's first stars began to glitter, something unspoken passed between them, a fragile thread of possibility, though neither dared yet to name it. And that was how the story began, on a lonely porch, with a knock a dare and the stirring of a hope too wild to ignore. So if you want to see where this powerful journey of love, loss and second chances leads, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the next chapter will take you deeper into the fire where hearts are tested and destinies forged. Night had fallen heavy across the plains, and the stars lay scattered over the sky like diamonds spilled from heaven's pocket, while the prairie wind whispered through the tall grass as though it carried secrets from long ago. And inside the ranch house the air was thick with silence, save for the faint crackle of a fire and the hesitant breaths of 3 souls who had just stepped into a storm far greater than they knew. Abigail had let the cowboy inside after his bold words, though her grip never strayed too far from the rifle resting against the hearth, because trust wasn't something she gave lightly anymore, not since the day she had buried her husband under the lone cottonwood tree that now stood like a sentinel on the edge of her land. And Samuel, small but sharp-eyed, clung to the edge of the wooden table, studying the stranger with a child's mixture of fear and wonder, while the cowboy, who had finally introduced himself as Luke Carver, sat with his hat in his hands, shoulders stiff as though the chair beneath him were made of thorns. Yet even in that tension, there was a softness beginning to unfold, for Luke found himself watching, turned away, whispering, "Men say a lot of things when they're tired and lonely, but promises don't mend broken hearts." And with that she left him on the porch, though he didn't walk away. Not then, not the next day, nor the day after. For Luke was a man who knew something about endurance, and every nail he drove, every lesson he taught Samuel, every quiet moment he stood watch by the barn, while coyotes howled in the distance, was his way of answering her without words, showing her that his promise was not made of dust but of iron. And it was Samuel, innocent and unguarded, who first broke the stalemate. For one night as the fire crackled low and Abigail tucked him into bed, the boy whispered, "Mama, can we keep him?" And though the question stung her with its childlike hope, it cracked something deep within her, a reminder that her son's heart longed for a father just as much as hers, longed for love. And so, with trembling hands, she lit the lamp and went to the porch where Luke sat sharpening his knife under the moonlight, his face rugged and tired yet steady as the earth itself. and she lowered herself into the chair beside him, the silence stretching long before. She finally spoke the words she had been holding back. "You want to be a father? Then start tonight. Samuel already looks at you like one." And Luke, his chest tightening with a swell of gratitude and determination, set his knife aside, his voice rough when he answered, "Then I swear, ma'am, I'll spend the rest of my life earning that look. From him and from you." And in that moment, with the prairie stars blazing above and the weight of tomorrow still uncertain, a widow, a boy, and a cowboy found themselves no longer three separate souls, but the beginning of a family, fragile yet fierce, born not of blood but of choice. And as the wind carried their quiet vows across the endless night, it whispered a promise to the land itself, that love, even when buried in sorrow, could rise again stronger than steel. And friends, if you've been moved by this journey of resilience, love, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because stories like this remind us all that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the sweetest.